Can you, if you see the maintenance guy, could you ask him, the cold
The
air,
lighting?
no, cold air blowing. I feel it right here.
Okay, let me talk to, it's 65 degrees.
What's it?
65.
That's cold.
So I had the temperature down, I think I put it up to about 79 and something, and it was quite hot throughout the summer.
So hello. I called maintenance to heat up the place because I know it's cold. For those of you who are paying attention. Okay, thank you. My pal.
Am I good to Am I good to start? Am I good to start? You want me to wait for a sec?
We want to wish everybody a happy new year, especially you, Rabbi. So we're ready to start now, and I made an announcement, but you were all kind of chumming with each other at the time. I called maintenance. I went to see him, actually. He said he'll put the heater on. It's not even on.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Glad to be back with you all. I sent an article to Susie and Rosa over the vacation that came up from the Miami Herald, and I wanted to, and Rosalie suggested that maybe I have a class on this, one class, because it's very important on anti-Semitism. And so I wanted to do that class today, and it is so current that on my way over here 15 minutes ago on the news, 90 synagogues this last weekend received a bomb threat. Here as well? Was there one here? Beth Hillel received one. My goodness. 90. And there were over 300 several weeks ago, bomb threats across the United States. So the article that I want to talk about today, and then we'll go through some nuances about anti-Semitism over the centuries. I think you'll find this interesting. It says, a tsunami of anti-Semitism is on the rise across Latin America, U.S. officials warn. And the reason why this caught my eye is because obviously we've been talking about a lot of Latin American countries and Jewish communities in Latin American countries. Okay, it's a long article, so I don't want to read the whole thing, but let me read some important parts of it. The oldest synagogue in Santiago, that's Chile, was defaced last week with graffiti calling for the overthrow of Zionism. That's important. Zionism. Earlier this month, the Jewish center in Buenos Aires that was the target of a deadly attack in 1994 received a new bomb threat vowing death to the Zionist Jews. One of Peru's largest newspapers ran a cartoon in November of Adolf Hitler giving a Nazi salute to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And in Brazil, a ring of individuals with suspected ties to Hezbollah were arrested for allegedly planning attacks on Jewish institutions across the country. Those incidents are part of a growing pattern of anti-Semitic activity across Latin America that is alarming U.S. officials who toured the region in early December to meet with local officials and members of the Jewish community. This is a quotation. Anti-Semitism is on the rise in Latin America. Aaron Kayak, U.S. Deputy Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, said in an interview with McClatchy. Anti-Semitism, unfortunately, was on the rise before October 7th. What we've seen since is a tsunami. In Brazil, for example, the local Brazilian Israelite Confederation was tracking slightly more than one complaint of anti-Semitism per day in October 22. By the end of this October, the total number of complaints received was 15 complaints per day, an increase of nearly 1,000%. We can say with confidence that the spike is real and that we're seeing things that we have not seen before. It's not that because Israel responds, anti-Semitism grows, Lautenberg said. It's that anti-Semitism is already there, and that an event like this makes them feel free to speak out. An event like this meaning the October 7th attacks on Israel and the aftermath of that and the war in Gaza. What concerns us is justification for what Hamas did on October 7th, Kayak said. They sought out to kill Jewish civilians. So one of the things we're on the lookout for in these meetings and all of our engagements internationally is whether there are government and civil society leaders who are justifying what are simply anti-Semitic attacks and murders. A study conducted by the Latin American Jewish community and Observatorio Web, an organization that monitors discrimination, found a 12% increase in anti-Semitic rhetoric on social media platforms after October 7th, matching a similar pattern they observed previously in the Gaza Strip in 2021 and 2014. The Latin American Jewish community is relatively small, with various academic studies estimating a population between 300,000 and 500,000 across the region, over half of whom reside in Argentina. Remember, we talked about the large population in Argentina and especially in Buenos Aires. The region also has a significant Palestinian population. We had mentioned that as well. With Chile home to roughly 500,000, the largest Palestinian community outside of the Palestine, outside the Middle East, yes. Let's see. As you know, we face a very unique situation in our country, given the presence of a large and influential Chilean Palestinian community that challenges us every day. Anti-Semitic incidents have increased sharply over the past decade across Europe and the United States. We know this for sure. Latin American synagogues have increasingly adopted security precautions. Brazil, home to the second largest Jewish community, foiled an alleged plot last month against Jewish targets that included suspected local Hezbollah recruits as well as individuals flying into the country after meeting with Hezbollah leadership in Lebanon. Hezbollah, a militant group backed by Iran and designated as a terrorist organization, has a long-time presence throughout Latin America. Several countries have been forceful in their condemnations of Israel. Chile and Colombia recalled their ambassadors, and Bolivia severed diplomatic ties outright. In Latin America, you have countries recalling ambassadors and excusing language accusing Israel of performing a genocide or massacres, and that goes on the shoulders of the local Jewish communities. Argentina has its own office devoted to combating anti-Semitism and has adopted a standard international definition of anti-Semitism. But Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, described Israel's preparation for a military response as Nazism. The U.S. government, okay, good. So you get the gist of the article. And so now what I want to do is look back through our history and talk about anti-Semitism and how it has changed over the centuries and why it's changed. First, let me tell you, also South Africa broke their diplomatic relations, despite all the help Israel gave them. And there's a significant Jewish community there. Thank you, Gary. So, two words that were mentioned in the end of this article. Genocide and Nazism. So, you have to be so very, very careful when you throw around words. So what does genocide mean? It means the destruction of a people. The destruction of a people. you can say whatever you want about Israel, but the Israeli mission statement is not to destroy and eliminate the Palestinian people. That would be genocide. But that's not what Israel's mission is. It's to destroy and eliminate Hamas. That's a completely different thing. So you can't just like casually say, oh, Israel is committing genocide. No, it's not. It's not. There is a conversation to be had, an argument to be made from both sides that could say Israel's response is disproportionate and huge numbers of Palestinians are dying, whereas only 1,000 or so Israelis died in a very brutal, very horrific way. That is a conversation that intelligent people can have. But to say that Israel is engaging in genocide is not a responsible statement. Also, to say that what Israel is doing is tantamount to Nazism, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. We all understand Hitler's mission was very, very different. And he brought a fascist regime. Who knows what, this word is being thrown around a lot. Fascism. Can someone tell me what fascism is? You hear it on the news all the time. It's important for us to understand what is fascism.
This is my understanding. It really started back in the 30s with the advent of dictators such as Hitler, Mussolini, and the like. And they were called themselves fascists. I don't really know the origin of the word fascism, but I know fascism by the leaders that I'm familiar with.
Anyone else? Ideas about what fascism is? Because you hear it all the time. Authoritarian, yes. So fascism is more like a political philosophy and an economic philosophy. It is where the government owns large numbers of large corporations and the wealth is concentrated in a few. So there is a power base at the top. It is more economic and political. It's not based on like religious ideology or something like that. It is putting the control into the hands of a few at the top. That is fascism. Okay, so as opposed to communism, communism is another economic philosophy where the state owns everything. And the objective is to have equality throughout the population. It's an economic practice, communism. Okay. Fascism, similar. Okay. So when we're talking about anti-Semitism, that's a sort of an all-encompassing word. Everything that's like hatred for the Jews is anti-Semitic. We have to be a little more educated than that and a little more specific. So there are three subsects of anti-Semitism that I want to talk about today. And they are anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism, and anti-Zionism. They all get grouped under anti-Semitism. But we should understand that they have changed over the course of history. Anti-Judaism, by most scholars, is defined as hatred of the Jews for religious reasons, which we're going to talk about. Anti-Semitism adds to that component, even more so, hatred of the Jews for ethnic reasons, because we are a member of the Jewish people, because we have Jewish blood, not because we don't worship Jesus, because we have Jewish blood. Anti-Zionism clearly is is the support of our home state of Israel. All right. In ancient times, early, in biblical times, there was no anti-Semitism. Why were Jews conquered by other nations? Because we had a temple that was worth a whole lot of money, and because the other empires wanted our territory. Why didn't they like us? Because we didn't willingly give it up. We always staged a revolt, and we were always a big pain in the tuchus. So they didn't like us because we were rebels, and we didn't want them to invade our country. It had nothing to do with the fact that we worshipped Adonai in our temple. It had nothing to do with the fact that we were people from Judea, the Judeans specifically. It had to do with the fact that this empire wanted Judea, or Judah at that time, because it was at the crossroads of everything in the ancient Middle East, and it was good territory to have. So we weren't hated by anyone for any specific reason. They just wanted our territory. The first time we get some hatred of Jews is from the Egyptian high priest Manetho, around 200 BCE. And what he writes is that our Exodus story was really the kicking out of Jews by the Egyptian authorities because we were an unclean people. So Manetho has some interesting ideas. Manetho identifies the Israelites as the Hyksos, who were thrown out of Egypt by Pharaoh Ahmose I. And they said, well, the Israelite story is really the story of the Hyksos that Ahmose I defeated and threw out of Egypt. There are some elements of our story and some elements of history that support the idea that Ahmose I actually was the Pharaoh under which Jews left Egypt, the Israelites left Egypt. There are other parts of our story and history which support the idea that Ramesses II, Yul Brynner, was the Pharaoh under whose leadership the Israelites left Egypt. Many academics think that both stories are true. There was the Hyksos leaving and the Israelites leaving, and that somewhere along the line the two stories were conflated, or they had elements of each one. We'll never know. But that's Manetho's idea, that the Israelites were actually Hyksos who were thrown out of Egypt. Remember, yes?
On that point, I think it's worth mentioning the fact. On that point, I think it's worthwhile mentioning the fact that the Hyksos were also from the Middle East. They were warriors, and they conquered all of the area. And the Israelites were also from the Middle East. So, they all look alike,
Well, what the part of our story that never makes sense is there arose in Egypt a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. That happens right away in the book of Exodus. And the idea is, how could there be a Pharaoh who didn't know Joseph? How could that possibly be? He was like really important. And he just died. So how could nobody know him? Well, it makes sense if you have a period of time under which the Hyksos invade and rule Egypt, and then many years later, a new pharaoh comes in, Ahmose I, to defeat the Hyksos. He would have no idea who Joseph was. So that part of the story makes sense. All right, moving on. Yes, Lana.
I've long believed that the stories, I haven't heard this part, but that these were oral traditions. Both the Hyksos and the Jews, Hebrews, were Semitic. They probably knew each other, and these stories got handed down. And our story talks about we came out in a mixed multitude. So we may have been a part of their exodus, and the stories that we've handed down is from our point of view.
Yes. This is all possible. Yes.
I have thought about this mixed multitude that Moses was accused of bringing out. Just remember one little thing, guys. The Hebrews were slaves, but they were not the only slaves that the Egyptians had. And what happens when there's a revolt and the slaves want to be free? Anybody who's a slave wants to go along with the right to freedom. So it is nothing but logical to think that many non-Hebrews also took the freedom ride out of slavery.
I'll finish this part of the discussion with just this fact. There is an ancient stele, monument, it's called the Tempest Stele, during the time of Ahmose I, which says there was a period of time in Egypt where everything was dark and black. There would there was no sun, there was a blackout. And when the Hyksos were expelled, they took with them lots of gold and silver. They were given lots of gold and silver to leave, just like our story. Okay, moving on. The first really big systematic incidences of anti-Semitism, and at this time in history, I'm going to call this anti-Judaism, meaning that that we were persecuted for what we believed in, for religious reasons. That's the major component. Comes with Hadrian, Emperor Hadrian in 135 CE. Hadrian comes to power, and he just hates the Jews, the Israelites. And what he does is he takes Jerusalem, and all the Jews have to leave Jerusalem. And he turns it into a pagan city called Aeolo Capitolina, honoring the god Zeus. Honoring the god Jupiter. Jupiter, who is Zeus in Greek mythology. Okay. And the Jews are only allowed to return to Jerusalem once a year on Yom Kippur. Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av. They're only allowed to return to Jerusalem on Tisha B'Av every year. And it remains a pagan city for a very long time. Hadrian was brutal, and they are known as the Hadrianic persecutions. It was a brutal time to be a Jew, either in Rome or in Judea at that time. Many persecutions, many torture, many killings. Okay. Constantine comes to the throne in 300, and he himself converts to Christianity. The Roman Empire makes Christianity the official religion with his successor, Theodosius I, in 379. But what Constantine had said is that the Jews were an abominable sect. Once again, because of what we believed, how we worshiped God. Constantine was now Christian, and the way we worshiped God and rejected Christianity was a problem. Yes, Lana? Revolt. So the question is, didn't the Bar Kokhba revolt have some influence on how Rome thought of them as Jews? So yes, except that the Bar Kokhba revolt wasn't a religious revolt, it was a political revolt. Bar Kokhba wanted to get Judea back because he was seen by Rabbi Akiva and others as the Messiah. So he was going to be appointed king. It was about territory, and it was about politics. It wasn't about what did you believe in. Yes. Constantine, what was his religion before he converted? He was pagan. He was pagan. He believed in many gods. Okay. So Constantine brings forth the Council of Nicaea, which sets up the structure of Christian belief for the empire. And one of the things that the Council of Nicaea did was it bans Jews from public office. So it had a number of discriminatory aspects to it. Islam then comes along in 600. And if you recall from our sort of brief discussion about medieval times, Muhammad goes to Medina, and he speaks with a number of Jewish clans. There were a number of Jews living in Medina at that time. Clearly, after the expulsion of Jews from Rome, and no, that's not what I want to say. There were, in 600 CE, Jewish communities all around in what we now call the diaspora, all throughout what is now the Middle East. And after the destruction of the temples, Jews were either taken as slaves or Jews left. So there was a migration out of the land. So there were Jewish communities in what is now Saudi Arabia in 600 CE when Muhammad gets there, when Muhammad is born. He goes to Medina and he speaks with a number of the leaders of these Jewish clans. And he says, I have this new religious philosophy. It was given to me by the angel Gabriel in a cave. And this is what it says. And I know you're going to love it. And so here's what it's about. And, there were a number of stories, narratives attached to this new idea, which he called Islam. Things like Abraham takes Ishmael to have him sacrifice, And so the Jewish clan leader said, no. Sorry. No. No. Absolutely not. No way. And Muhammad got very angry. He had decided early on that Jews and Christians were what he called people of the book. So they were called dhimmis, protected people. We've talked about that a number of times. Once the Jewish clans reject him, then he becomes very anti-Jewish. And that is where the beginning happens in problems between Muslims and Jews. In the beginning, with Muhammad, it was religious. That's going to be super important. But it doesn't end up that way. Okay, put Islam on hold for the moment. Yes?
It's the same with the Christianity. It started as because first Christians were Jews and they rejected the other Jews.
Correct. It's the same thing with Christianity. The first Christians were Jews, and they rejected. Okay. Continuing on, in the 1100, around 1100, we have the beginning of the Crusades. And the Crusades were religious wars. The Pope asked the knights to go in and take Jerusalem back from the Muslims, which had been conquered by Saladin. Okay, so it was religious in nature. It was actually political because the Pope wasn't so popular and he needed a distraction. But the purpose, the stated purpose of the Crusades was religious. And the people who went on the Crusades as warriors and knights and peasants who followed along understood it as a religious march to Jerusalem. And we know along the way, Jewish communities were decimated. And many Jews committed suicide rather than be killed or raped. And so we have our incidences of persecution of Jews for religious reasons, which still falls under anti-Judaism. In 1215, we have the Fourth Lateran Council called by the popes, in which Jews have to wear special clothing, among other discriminatory actions. Again, because we believed in something different, and because we were blamed for having killed Jesus. Now, so, we have to, as intelligent adults, we have to sort of understand what happened. So Caiaphas, who is the high priest, Jesus is a renegade priest, shall we say. He is preaching a belief in Judaism, a theology in Judaism, which was not the prevailing belief of the temple hierarchy. He was preaching that the world is coming to an end and that everybody better get themselves purified because God is coming and the world is going to end. Caiaphas didn't like that. And there were a number of Jews who were buying into Jesus' message. Remember, Jesus was completely Jewish, absolutely 100% Jewish, practicing Jewish, preaching Judaism to Jews. So Caiaphas turns him over. He has a trial in the Sanhedrin, and Caiaphas turns him over to the Roman authorities. Did Caiaphas know what the Roman authorities were going to do to him? I mean, well, I have to believe he did. Did Jews execute him? No. Romans executed him. Were Jews complicit in that? Probably. I mean, we just have to be intellectually and academically honest about this. Caiaphas probably knew what was going to happen. And Jesus was a really big thorn in the temple hierarchy side. Okay. So the idea that was rampant in the Middle Ages, that the Jews killed Jesus, that we were responsible for what's called deicide, the killing of God. Does it have some basis in truth? Maybe there's something in the... We started a process, and at the end of the process, although we weren't responsible for what happened, we started the process for what happened. There could be an argument made for that. Did we kill Jesus? No. So Gary says other Jews were handed over to the Romans as well, and they were crucified, so everybody knew what was going to happen. Yes, Joette. You can only call it deicide if you believe that Jesus was God, of course. And Christians did believe that, so that was the charge that was against us. Yes. So this is a tricky question. So Lana asks, at the time of the crucifixion, approximately according to most estimates, around 30, 31, 32, 33, something like that, CE. Did Christians believe that Jesus was God? And did Jews believe that Jesus was God? Okay, here's why it's a tricky question. Because you don't have Christianity yet. Okay? When Jesus dies, there is no such thing as Christianity. Christianity becomes, the genesis of Christianity comes later with Paul. Paul is executed in 60. Did Jews believe that Jesus was God? Some Jews did. Some Jews believed that he was the Messiah. Correct. So Lana says, but we don't believe in a Messiah that is God. So correct. So I will have to qualify that statement. No, even some Jews, the Jews who were following Jesus did not believe he was God, but many of them did believe that he was the Messiah sent by God. Early in his ministry, Jesus denied it and said, no, I'm not. At the end of his ministry, kind of yes. I am. Okay. That's not put down until the Gospels are written. That's correct. Oh, yes. Was stoning, correct. Ziesel points out that the preferred method of execution for the Romans was crucifixion, and the preferred method of execution for Jews, by Jews, was stoning. That's correct. Okay, so then we have the Black Death, the bubonic plague. It wipes out 1/3 of the population of Europe. And Jews, as we know, are accused of poisoning the wells. And then in 1475, we have the first instance of blood libel, where Jews are accused of murdering a Christian child and using its blood to make matzah for Passover. And we've talked about this a number of times. It's so beyond ridiculous, because the one fluid that we can't eat is blood. So, it's just, anyway. But it had to do with religious reasons, because we would not accept Jesus as the Messiah. In 1500, we have the Protestant Reformation. Protestant Reformation led by Martin Luther. And Luther's very, very original idea was, okay, I'm going to present this new form of Christianity, and the Jews are going to convert, they're going to love it and buy into it, and everything's going to be great. And we said, no, thank you very much. And then Luther went crazy, virulently anti-Semitic. He called us vermin. Yes, a current word. He called us vermin. So he was virulently anti-Jewish. For what reason? Because we would not accept his version of theology. Not because we were members of the Jewish people. It was a religious reason, again. Starting in the late 1800s, we have something different that goes on. So Colonel Dreyfus, and we know about the Dreyfus Affair in France, and Dreyfus was taken into custody for political reasons, and accused of treason. The problem that they had with Dreyfus was not that he didn't accept Jesus as the Messiah. It's that he was a Jew. He was a member of the Jewish people, and Jews couldn't be trusted. Around the same time, we have the assassination of Tsar Alexander II in Russia. The Jews did not participate in the assassination, but we were blamed for having organized it and participated in it. Once again, this was a political event, and Jews were singled out not because they wouldn't accept Jesus as the Messiah. They were singled out because they were members of the Jewish people who could not be trusted and who were plotting against the government. So in every instance that you've mentioned, we're the scapegoats. Oh, absolutely. Good question. If we hadn't been around, who would have replaced us? Oh, I don't know, but they would have found somebody. So my main point here is that starting around the mid to late 1800s, the idea of anti-Semitic behavior gets rooted into something else. It's no longer because you won't accept Jesus as the Messiah, which is all the way here. All of a sudden, starting in the 1800s, it becomes an ethnic problem. The people are now anti-Semitic because you are against Jews for being Jews, for being members of the Jewish people, for being members of the Jewish race. In 1903, we have the most famous instance of blood libel. It's called the Baylis blood libel in Kiev, and clearly that one is religious. But then also in 1903, we have what are called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a made-up manifesto which says that there is a worldwide plot among Jews to take over the world, basically. It's political. It's against Jews because they're Jews, and they can't be trusted. Yes.
I believe that in that last week, Jews were also referred to as a cabal of Jews.
Yes. So Zisel says in that last blood libel that Jews were referred to as a cabal of Jews. Yes, exactly. Like a community, a group, they come together. So in that sense, it was a little bit political and ethnic as well. Yes.
The current term globalist, is that harken back to this idea of Jews taking over the world?
The current term of globalist, in what sense are you saying that?
Politically, you hear politicians talk about, and in a condescending way, about the globalists, along with other negative attributes.
Well, so if Jews are in those statements, then yes.
I feel like they are, but I don't know if they are. But
So I mean, you hear a lot, people who are accusing the Jews of they've taken over the movie industry, they've taken over the government, they're running the country, they want to take over the world. This started with the protocols of the elders of Zion, and
I think it started with nationalism, modern nationalism in the 1800s when the states became like nation states in Europe and Jews were not considered part of it.
so maybe this started with the birth of nation states in Europe when Jews weren't considered part of it. In the 1920s, we know through history that Henry Ford was virulently anti-Semitic. In fact, Hitler quoted him in Mein Kampf. For a long time, Ford put out a weekly news report, The International Jew, the World's Problem. And it was based on the protocols of the elders of Zion. Oh, so, yes.
I saw a documentary recently regarding Henry Ford. It said that every car that he sold had a pamphlet or paper in it with these.
The protocols, yeah. That every car he sold had a pamphlet against the Jews. Yeah. I would not be surprised. In 1930, of course, we know Hitler comes to power, and he comes to power on a platform which he learned from the mayor of Vienna, Karl Lueger, who won 3 terms scapegoating Jews. And Hitler learned that, okay, all you have to do is identify a common enemy, and then everyone will unite behind that enemy. And that was the height of, hating Jews for ethnic reasons. Obviously, Hitler's whole idea was racial. If you had even the smallest percentage of Jewish blood, you were Jewish. So it was all racial and ethnic. Then we come to modern America in the 30s, the 40s, and we understand that America was a very anti-Semitic country for a long time. There were quotas at colleges. In my city, Burbank, up until the 50s, there were signs that said no blacks and no Jews allowed. Glendale, too. America was a very racist and anti-Semitic country. 1947, we have the partition plan for Israel, and 1948, the creation of the State of Israel. Now something changes, because you'll recall that everything was fine when the Muslims were the majority population in what was then called Palestine. As soon as Jews became a majority population and had their own half of what the Muslim Arabs felt was their land, then the hatred of the Jews became not because you didn't accept Jesus as the Messiah, not that you are a member of the Jewish people, it's that you are a member of people who took our land, and we want our land back. You were the people who took our land. Yes.
I'd like to point out a little historical fact in Israel. Israel was desolate during the
Israel was desolate during the
desolate. Then
Jews began to come after 1881
make arable land.
and make arable land.
The problem began because these agricultural settlements needed labor that they imported from places like Iraq.
Yes, they imported labor from the Arab countries, and also the Arabs sold their land to the Jews.
Dunam by dunam,
Yes, yep,
they sold it at exorbitant prices, and the Jews bought it.
yep,
And when these new people came in as laborers, they became Hamas.
yes, yep. And so the idea is that now anti-Semitism has a very strong component after 1948 of anti-Zionism. Why do we hate Jews? Because they took Arab land. Not because they are members of the Jewish people, not because they didn't accept Jesus, because they took our land. Now, go to the other side under Islam. Remember that in the very beginning, Muhammad has a religious problem. All throughout the history of Jews living under Islam, there's very little anti-Semitism of any kind. When does it start between Muslims and Arabs again? Between Muslims and Jews again? After a little before 1948, but yeah, you had the riots in Jerusalem, but it had to do with who is the majority population, who controls the land. It's about land. It's political and it's about land.
It starts actually during Hitler's time because you have the Grand Mufti.
Exactly, the Grand Mufti.
He goes to all the Arab land and starts spreading anti-Semitism under the direction of Hitler.
Yes, and start spreading anti-Semitism under the direction of Hitler. So, you had some incidents within Jews under Islam, anti-Semitic incidents, but it happens. It gets magnified exponentially when it has to do with land and majority population. When Jews were living in the land of, at then time, Palestine, and the Muslim Arabs were the majority population, they didn't have a problem with Jews because of what they worshipped or because they were Jews. They didn't have a problem as long as they were the majority population and they controlled the land. Okay. Yes.
Because I keep hearing this controversy that there never was a Palestine.
That there never was a Palestine. Well, there was an area that was called Palestine, yes, and it was divided up in 1947 after World War II, and the United Nations gave basically half the territory to the Palestinian Arabs who were living there, and the other half to the Jews. And the Palestinian Arabs said no. There was not a country called Palestine. There was an area, a territory called Palestine. Okay, hang on, because I got to finish now. So the religious anti-Semitism ends for Catholics in 1965 with Nostra Aetate. Nostra Aetate was an edict put out by the Pope that said the Jews were not responsible for killing Jesus, and Jews, the Jewish covenant is in force for the Jews. In other words, the Christian covenant does not supersede the Jewish covenant any longer. That was a claim as well. However, for Protestants, by and large, there is not that religious condemnation anymore. Among certain evangelical groups, yes, absolutely, they still will say Jews killed Jesus. Absolutely. But those are a minority. Among most Protestant groups, they will accept that Jews didn't kill Jesus and that our covenant is for us. So, the takeaway that I want for all of you to get is that what we call, in a grand sense, anti-Semitism actually has some kind of specific ideas over the course of history. It begins firstly, in biblical times, there isn't anything. They just went after us because we had territory they wanted. Then it became religious, especially through Europe, obviously, because of Christianity. Under Islam, during this whole time, we were just dhimmi, second-class citizens. We were tolerated. Everything was fine. Then it gets a very strong ethnic component to it, starting in the late 1800s. Now it's because we are members of the Jewish people. We're just Jews, and we can't be trusted, and we're not okay as Jews. Then we get to 1948, or a little before, but approximately, it's easy. But 1948 is easy for us to remember. There's a huge anti-Zionist component to the anti-Semitism, which is what we are witnessing right this second. So those people who are marching in the streets, shouting down Israel, saying Israel is committing genocide, Israel, it's not because we're Jews. It's not because we don't accept Allah or Jesus as the Messiah. It's because in many people's mind, we took land that wasn't ours. The United Nations made that pronouncement. The United Nations gave that land to the Jews. The Jews didn't take it. The United Nations gave that land. The Jews did take some land over the next years, especially during the 67 war, when Jerusalem gets reunited. Okay, they took land. And you're going to yell at them for that? Every war somebody takes land. Why is it only that Israel can't take land when it wins a war? After it was attacked, after it was 67 was preemptive, but the other two, we were attacked. And so why is it that Israel is the only country in the world that can't enlarge itself after it's been attacked? You know? So the current examples of anti-Semitism have a very strong anti-Zionist component to them. The people, once again, I'll close with this. Those who are marching in the streets, saying from the river to the sea, right? They are not going after Jews because we didn't accept Jesus, and they are not going after Jews because we are members of the Jewish people. It's not an ethnic problem. It is a political land problem. They're going after Jews because they feel Jews took their land. Jews took what rightfully belonged to them. That's why they're shouting. And that's what gets grouped under anti-Semitism. So we have to just be careful. Over the course of history, in each time period, anti-Semitism really has a different component during these three periods, which becomes the most dominant area of the anti-Semitism. And I'll leave you with this. And as we recall, look, Jews, if we're going to be very intellectually honest about this, and we're adults and we have to be intellectually honest. So, Jews had the land from approximately 1000 BCE with King David, right, all the way up to about 600 when it's conquered by Islam. So that's 1600 years, right? How long did Islam have the land? 600 all the way up until 19, let's say after you have the British Mandate, but they were the dominant population on the land. For the moment, let's use 1948 because it's just an easy date to remember. How long is this? 600 to 1900, 1300 years. Okay, how long did we have it? 1600 years. Okay, so you can understand. We may not agree, but we can understand why they would be angry. Because they were the dominant population on the land for a very long time. Does that mean that they deserve all the land? No. The United Nations gave it to half of it to us in 1947. Done. Over. Done. It was a political decision made by the rest of the world that gave it to us. And so it belongs to us. But you can understand why they would be upset by that. They have to live with that decision. They have to live with the UN's decision. Or not. They can commit massacres and do horrendous, horrific things to try to get out of it. But it was a United Nations decision. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful week. I'll see you next week.
Priscilla. How are you? Hello, everybody at home. Hello, everybody here. I heard that they were taking care of Judy and Mel when they couldn't get into their house.
That was crazy. And they kept going back and seeing if they could try, and then nope, they came back. I mean, they didn't get in till like
1 o'clock, right. Okay, good morning, everybody. Let's get together. What do you say? Grab your coffee and your snacks. Good morning. Definitely a Jewish crowd. So, do you really think I should say something? Okay. So, I completely respect the lessons that you have from the rabbi, but because of a friend of mine, I'm kind of a scholar on early days at the end of the 19th century, so the 1800s, and even before that with regard to demographics in Israel. So it's absolutely true that that Muslims, but that also means Turkey later on, and then the British Mandate, which the rabbi mentioned. But it is absolutely true that Islam conquered that part of the land. But what I feel that Rabbi, it's Goodman, right, didn't say is that the demographics of Jews staying in the land that whole period of time is really large. So it may be that that somebody else conquered the area and it went through a number of different things. However, it's very important to know that Jews have existed not just in little handfuls, but in large numbers in what we now call Medina Yisrael, the state of Israel, since actually before this time, all the way through. So that's the only thing I want to tell you, not that he was incorrect about the fact that the area was conquered. I mean, the reason that we have a mosque on the Temple Mount is because of that, that area was conquered. However, when you're in a conversation with somebody, Jewish presence has always throughout that entire time been quite numerous. And I have a number of books and maps at home that verify that. So,
in addition, we know that in 1867 that Mark Twain went to Israel, and he reported back that there were hardly anybody there, and it was desolate. So, but in the 1880s, that's when the Jews started coming in, and as a result of that, Arabs or Muslims started coming in because we were building up the land. So that's the major population growth that takes place.
it's an additional population growth. But, you know, when you talk about Jewish life in Israel, we have 2 temples, right? The second one was destroyed in 70 of the Common Era, but we were living in the land in 586 before the Common Era and much before that. So I'm not trying to say that he's not correct about who conquers the land, but who conquers the land is not an effective comment about who's lived in the land the longest. And in addition to that, one of the things that we think about incorrectly is that Jewish population grew in Israel as a result of the Shoah, as a result of the Holocaust. And it's true that large numbers of people came and settled in the land. But when people make arguments like that, when you have numerous families living in Israel now who can tell you, who can document for you how long, how many generations their same family have lived in the land. So I'm not contradicting him. I'm just saying this is something that we need to be aware of when we're having conversations with people, because most of the time people say, well, you only really, you had it in biblical times, then you didn't, and then you only came back after World War II, which is patently false. And that's all for me on that, because that's not what I teach. But so we're going to move on. Cecil, you wanted to say something?
Yes,
Then here is a microphone specially for you.
Thank you. Just a personal note. Quite a number of years ago, I met a family. In fact, here at Ariel, and I think he was American, but she was actually Israeli. And the interesting thing about her is that she was the latest member of a very, very long historical family that lived in Jerusalem all the time. She was a born Jerusalemite, and her ancestry never ever left Jerusalem.
Thank you. So those are the important things to know. But now we'll do a turnaround because I teach Talmud. So today what we're going to take a look at is going to be in two different texts for part of the time, because there are two different Talmuds, I told you. One is the Jerusalem Talmud, and I teach a class on Shabbat afternoon every other week about the Jerusalem Talmud and the texts with that. But then the other is the Babylonian Talmud. So you're getting two different sheets, but I will guide you through it. I just wanted to make sure that we had a number of different things here for us to take a look at. But our topic today is taking care of parents. So we know that in the Torah, in biblical things, one of the absolutely most important commandments is Chabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Honor your father and your mother. So the texts that we're going to do today are based on that commandment that comes out of the Torah. And there are some really moving texts that are beautiful and some really amazing texts. And hopefully what will come out of this is a conversation about all of us who are here, I am sure, have at one point in our lives taken care of those who are older than we. So I think that it's a wonderful thing to take a look at this. And we can also, I'm saying this as a joke, but we can also use these texts to point out to our children what responsibilities are with regard to their parents. But there are some that are really very honest and let us know how difficult sometimes these kinds of interactions can be, even when you have great relationships with your parents or great relationships with your children or anybody in your family. So I am going to distribute these two, or ask people to distribute these two. Rosalie, thank you. This one that says taking care of parents at the top is the main text that we're going to be doing. This is a secondary text that I'll probably refer to. The text that is taking care of parents comes from the Jerusalem Talmud, and the text that either doesn't have a heading or says Kiddushin 31a and b comes from the Babylonian Talmud. So take into your hand for right now the text taking care of parents. And what's different about what we're doing today than other weeks that we have done, thank you, that can be handed out. Okay. That's what, I didn't get to write it on all of them, but I want to just make it clear that in other lessons that we have had together, okay, there are 2 packets. I don't have any more. Okay, folks. You'll be holding 2 packets. The one you need to hold on top is taking care of parents. The only other thing I want you to know is that in other classes we've done together, I have brought texts from numerous different sites. I don't have any more. So could people get together with one another and share? Okay. This is all from one text. Okay, thank you. Does everybody have one that they can at least share with somebody else? If you are sitting next to somebody and you can share with them and somebody doesn't have one, please do so. Thank you. Okay. So what I want to start with you about is the blessing for learning, and then we'll go into the text. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Here we are back, folks, immersing ourselves in learning. So I want you to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines from the top of taking care of parents. You'll find the words, what is fear? If you see the word, what is fear, it comes from the Hebrew that's up a few lines, Ezehu Mora. Not teacher, but comes from the word yira. Yira isn't really fear. Yira is awe. Okay, so when you see the word fear translated in these texts, it's not like, it's like, oh, I'm responsible. Okay, so let's start with that. So they're talking about different rabbis and how they should be dealing with their parents. So let me, before you read this whole darn thing, before we start, let me just say that that these are rabbis talking to each other about what their responsibilities are to their parents. So it's not people on the street. They start with the people who are responsible for the community as a whole, and they have this discussion all in one tractate of the Jerusalem Talmud, one volume, or in one volume of the Babylonian Talmud in Kiddushin. So, who's going to read? Okay, what is fear is what we're starting with.
What is fear? He may not sit in his place and may not speak in his stead, nor contradict his words.
So who is this? The Son with the Father.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys remember All in the Family, but it seems to me that the Jerusalem Talmud is quoting something that then, or the other way around, that then got taken into that television show. So how many people know people who don't want other people to sit in their chair? Okay, so I have that at home. There's an indentation on our couch because that's where my husband likes to sit. So you can't sit in their place. And what are the other two things?
Not speak in their stead, or contradict.
Right. So in other words, no matter what you know about what your parent has said, you cannot quote that. You can't speak for them when it comes to anything, and you certainly can't contradict them. So then we get to the next part. Keep going.
What is honor? He feeds and gives him to drink, clothes him, covers him, and puts on his shoes, leads him out and in.
Okay. So this is obviously a very, very elderly parent who is unable to really take care of themselves. And we're going to see a lot more of this kind of text because it's beautiful what they come up with regard to the question of respect. So, well, that's nice. Let's all dance. So these things, anybody have anything to say about that? Feeds them, gives him stuff to drink, clothes him, covers him, puts on his shoes, make sure he's stable, all of those kinds of things. It's basically the lives of many people, right? This is thousands of years ago, and it's obviously these things are the same things. So now there comes a really great question. Keep going a little bit more.
Okay. From whose money?
Aha! Who hasn't heard of people who have had to have this kind of conversation? This is real life, right? It's real life. Not just then, but now. So I'm sure everybody has had that, either had that discussion or had friends who have had that discussion. Oh my God, who's responsible for all this? I know I'm responsible for the things, but how do I financially manage this? So what happens? Go on.
Huna bar Haya said, and from the old man's, some want to say from his own.
Aha. So what do we have here? Thank you, Talmud.
Difference of opinion.
Yeah. So they are having a discussion, and like people everywhere, some people are going to say, well, you're working and you're earning money, so all of this is you're responsible for. And there are going to be some people who say, but, they have funds, so it's up to them. Okay, so now let's just stop for a minute. And does anybody you don't have to give a personal view, but has anybody gone through this or experienced friends who have gone through this? Because this whole thing is about how do you show respect for somebody? So how do you show respect for somebody? You do all the things for them, but then do you have to also foot the bill?
Well, my father lived with me until he died. I say, toward the end of my father's life, he came to live with me and my husband at the time, and we just took him in and treated him the same way we would treat my children, and took care of him, even though he was not without funds. And then if we'd go out or something, he would often, decide that he was going to pay for the meal or whatever. But
So it went back and forth.
it went back and forth, exactly.
Thank you. Now we're going to see keep that money thing in mind and see how far the rabbis think that goes, because the next few lines are how far they think it goes. So does somebody else want to read now? Let me just ask you, is it better that we have people read, or is it better if I do it? What do you want to do?
Well, it might be faster if you just...
Okay, you do the next one. No, okay. Okay, so then it's the next lines after that, all about a wallet.
Okay, where it's Huna bar Haya.
Yep,
Huna bar Haya said, from the old man's. Some want to say from his own. Did not Rabbi Abahu say in the name of Rabbi Yosef bar Hanina, from where do we know that even if his father tells him to throw the wallet into the sea, that he should obey him?
okay, so they're giving an example. Expenditure of funds based on what a parent might like or require. So this is just kind of an example. How far do you go with this? So what is it that his father has told him to do? Throw your money away, out there into the water. Go on.
That is, if he has another one, and if it helps to quiet his father's spirit.
There we go. So what is the ultimate understanding about why do they use this wallet analogy? I mean, we have sayings in English, throw away your money, right? Oh, you're just throwing away your money. But the rabbis have a meaning here. So what are they saying? Let me get that.
I don't understand what
You don't understand what they're saying? It won't go that far.
You're getting your exercise. Well, it sounds like they're saying that even if your father tells you to do something stupid, like throw your wallet into the water, you should obey him. That's a way of honoring him. And especially if he has another wallet or you have another wallet, so that you're not going to be without funds.
Okay, so how does that...
So, it reminds me of when my mother started to when she had dementia, which was for like 4 to 5 years of the last years of her life. My husband and I were out of town, and I got a call from her aide, and her aide told me, she wants to call her mother. Well, my mother was 96 years old, and my grandmother had been gone for a very long time. And the advice that we got from the therapists and social workers was to say, just tell her, you know what, we can't do that right now, but we'll call them later. To let her honor her wish, and hopefully she'll forget about it, and that kind of thing.
Okay, so they know that this is an example. So if you have to basically be in a situation where you think, I'm spending or throwing my money toward what my parent needs or wants me to do, that's the throwing the wallet into the water. And that's okay. You're supposed to do that. But only if what? What? Yeah, well, you could take the money out of it, but they also say it's not just, yeah, just if you have another wallet. So what does that mean? In real life, what does that mean? You can spend money on your father or your mother, even if you feel like it's not an expenditure you would want to make, as long as what? You can afford it, as long as you have other resources. Because one thing that Jewish law will tell you is that if you only have a certain amount and you have a family of young kids or whatever that you have to take care of, that ultimately taking care of those children comes first. So this is a discussion that they have in real life the way many, many people do. If you got that second wallet, then certainly do whatever it is that's going to make your father feel better, to quiet his spirit. So both men and women. I'm going to go on with this a little. Only the man has the power in his hand, but the woman does not have the power in her own hand because others have disposition over her. We've discussed that, right? If you are a woman who is married, it's much better in Judaism than it is in other traditions at the time. In other words, women could have businesses, they could have their own money. A man couldn't decide where to go or what to do in terms of changing locations or jobs or whatever without consulting his wife. However, nonetheless, the man is the one who is generally the breadwinner and therefore had more control over all of those things than women in that time did. But, are you with me? If she is widowed or divorced, the power is in her own hands. Right? So she has full control. And for those who like to read novels that take place in England during the Victorian era or the Regency era, will see that that's exactly the kind of life that women had during that time. When they got to be free was when they no longer had a man in the house. So now here's a really good one. Go and ask Dama ben Netina. Dama means a woman. Dama ben Netina, but Dama is the name of the guy who was the head of the city council. We don't know whether his name was really Dama ben Netina, because what we have of him is that he was is the story of his mother. So go ahead and read that story.
Okay. Natima was the head of the city council.
Yeah.
Once his mother was slapping him in front of the entire council, and a slipper fell from her hand, and he handed it back to her so that she should feel no inconvenience.
Okay, stop with that.
Wow.
In the other text, we also have something about her. Use the mic, please. In the other text, we also have something about her. And we have in the Babylonian text, I'll read it even though you have this text in hand, when Dama ben Netina was wearing a fine cloak of gold and was sitting amongst the nobles of Rome, And his mother came and tore his garment off of him.
Oh my God.
This is on 1, 2, 3 on the 4th page, and smacked him on the head and spat in his face, and yet he did not embarrass her. So we have this in both Talmudic texts, which shows that there probably was somebody named this who was a city council head, and a couple of times they have an experience of his mom coming in and trying to humiliate him, even like in a group of Roman hierarchy. And what does he do?
He takes it.
What?
He takes it.
He takes it. So, yes. So, any comments about this? I think these texts are really interesting.
So, do you think it's true, or is it just a parable to teach a lesson in an extreme situation? You know, creating an extreme situation to teach a lesson.
I
Does it
don't
sound
think
so
in
absurd?
this particular case, I do not think that these are just tales. First of all, you have 2 volumes of Talmud from different places in the world that are conveying this to us with different incidents. But in addition to that, they go through literally identifying which rabbis in the Talmud had these experiences with their parents.
I think it can easily happen with, to people with dementia, that they get so angry and outburst with.
Yeah, it does seem like a.
We
you'd
are
have
going to
be
find
your
out that
mind.
it's not necessarily just that. Although they do make mention of that, it's not necessarily just that. We live in a different society. In our society, if I were to ask people sitting around the room how careful we are about what we ask our children or our relatives, how careful we are about making sure that we retain those relationships when we live in a generation where there isn't a lot of this, like stooping or getting up from your parents' chair, whatever. I want to know, besides those of you who have a chair that that nobody else sits in, how many people have ever gotten up and have had their children say, "Oh no, please get up and take this seat instead of me"? Good for you.
But what about in a public, responding that way? You said it was at some kind of a meeting with people. I mean, to come in and slap your son around and rip his clothes in a public meeting where it took place.
Okay, she's saying this mother went into a public meeting and denigrated her son. If you are unhappy with your child's responses on a day-to-day basis, a really good way to get them to do what you would like, if you have that kind of idea, is to go in and to denigrate them publicly. But it's absolutely possible that his mother had some mental loss. I'm going on, we're going on.
Am I through with reading?
All right. Okay, hand it back to her, so she should feel no inconvenience. I'm going to read this one. All right, do you see Rebbe Hizkiah? Said, he was a Gentile from Ashkelon and the head of the city council. That was the person who did that. He never sat on the stone on which his father used to sit, and when his father died, he worshipped the stone. Now, they had to say this was not a Jewish person, because a Jewish person would be forbidden from worshiping a stone. But, many of us do something similar when we have When we have lost our parents, we hold on to something that is very meaningful to us from what they had. So here's the story. One of the Jaspies, it means Jaspers, a Benjamin, meaning the breastplate from the temple in Jerusalem was all the different tribes, and they each had a stone associated with them. So they have, this assumes that during that period of time, they still have the breastplate, and one of the Jaspers, a Benjamin, was lost. They inquired, who would have one of similar quality? They were informed that Dama ben Netina did. So skip that next page that says, it goes backwards to 3, and go to page 5 of 11 down at the bottom. Can you see that? Okay. So they said the same guy had it. So now, who's going to read? So what did the rabbis do? They went to him.
They went to him and agreed on 100 dinars. He went to the upper floor to bring it and found his father sleeping. Some say that the key to the chest was in his father's fingers. Some say his father's foot was resting on the chest. He descended to them and told them, I could not bring it to you. They thought maybe he wants more money and raised the price to 200, then to 1,000. When his father woke up from his sleep, he went up and brought it to them. They wanted to give him according to the amount last mentioned, but he refused. He said, do I sell my father's honor for money? I will not have any advantage from honoring my father. What reward did the Holy One praise to him give him? Rabbi Yossi ben Arbun said, the following night his cow gave birth to a red heifer, and Israel gave him its weight in gold and took it.
Okay, stop right there. There are a couple of we know about the red heifer, right? It's a biblical thing, a special cow that has only like red hair, whatever, fur, and they were extremely special. So we have what I love about this in Talmud, maybe something that you haven't yet focused around. This is a beautiful example of honoring your father, right? And who does it? The son, who is the head of the council, right? One of the town councils, but is not Jewish, right? We've learned that. I think it's really important that we know that the rabbis had, in numerous different places, acknowledge the beauty and behavior and kindness and lessons that could come to them from people that they interacted with in the community who were not part of their religious community. So this is a really good example of that. And they use him as one of the greatest representations of how you can be conscientious about your parents, but also just conscientious in general, right? Because what would he not do? He wouldn't wake up his dad from his nap, no matter what, and then he would not take any more money than the first amount that he had asked for, because he thought that that wasn't the right thing to do. So any other comments about this?
But he got rewarded.
He did get rewarded, but not because he asked for it. They consider it basically a miracle that the cow gave birth to the red heifer, and they gave him the weight in gold, and they got the red heifer. Now that is basically saying, God did this, caused this to happen because God wanted to guide the people in order to be able to do that additional good for a person who was so straight up and loving. Okay. The Holy One prays to him, will not wait to give the reward for good deeds to Gentiles. It's not, back in the day, people were very cloistered in their communities, but you'll see in the Talmud that that's not the case. Okay, ready for Rabbi Tarfon? He was a big deal guy. His mother went to promenade in her backyard on Shabbat, and what happens? Her slipper broke. So Rebbe Tarfon went and put his 2 hands under her feet, and she walked on them until she got to her couch. Once, the sages came to visit him, and she told the sages, pray for my son Tarfon. Why? Because he honors me too much. So what kind of example of a parent do you have there? A smart one. A loving one. Yes, absolutely the same Rabbi Tarfon who's mentioned in the Haggadah. He is often quoted or mentioned in the Talmud. So what we've got is this guy is a huge scholar, a sage, listened to by so many different people, and yet, if his mom breaks her shoe on Shabbat, what can you not do with the shoe? You can't fix it because it's the Sabbath. So you could go into the house and get another pair, but you may as well put your hands under her feet so she can get into the house to get another pair. Anyway, so he's got that. So one of the things you learn is that he's amazing, and he's not so full of himself that he doesn't know exactly how to help his mother. But what the most important thing is what we learn from the mother. Anybody have anything to say about that?
Well, she was concerned about her son. She was concerned about her son.
Right.
So that's...
So who does she go to say, I am concerned about my son?
Sages, I don't know.
Yeah. She goes to his colleagues and says, look, you got to do something. I mean, it's great that he puts his hands under my feet if my shoe breaks, but that is going too far. Yeah. So you've got her. But now, who will read about, so she says, hold on a second. Pray for my son Tarfon because he honors me too much. And they asked her, what did he do for you? And she told them what had happened. And they said to her, even if he did this 1,000,000 times, he did not reach even half of the honor that the Torah requires. So, yes?
This is an object lesson for the ruling in the Torah and the commandment, honor thy father and mother.
Mm-hmm. They are parsing out, what does this really mean? And so they are the ones that say to her, look, it's very lovely that you think he's doing too much for you, but he's not. That's great. But one of the things that's true is that she is so lovely about it. So now, let's go on to Rabbi Ismael's mother. Who's going to read that?
Rebbe Ismael's mother came, spoke, and complained to our teachers about him. She said to them, "Scold my son Ismael because he does not honor me." At that, the faces of our teachers became saffron-colored. They said, "Is it possible that Rabbi Ismael does not honor his parents?" They said to her, "What did he do to you?" She said, "When he comes from the house of assembly, I want to wash his feet and drink from it." And he refuses. Let's see.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. I'm just turning the page.
Yeah. They
said, since it is her wish to honor Rebbe,
Since it is her wish.
it is her honor.
Okay. So keep going a little bit more.
Okay. Rebbe Mana said, the Millers are correct when they say that each and every person has in his chest that which is appropriate for him.
Okay. Go on.
Rabbi Tarfon's mother said, and so they answered her appropriately. Rabbi Ismael's mother said so, and they answered her appropriately.
Okay, let's stop with that for a minute. Okay, no, go on. Rabbi Zera.
Rabbi Zera was sorry and said, if only I had a father or mother that I could honor them and inherit paradise. When he heard these two instructions, he said, praise to the All-Merciful that I have neither father nor mother. I could have not done as Rabbi Tarfon did, and I could not accept what Rabbi Ismael accepted.
There you go. All right. So now this is a great part in this text too, because with regard to Rabbi Ismael, what did the rabbis say to him about his mom? If she wants to drink the dirty water from which she cleanses your feet, that's her prerogative. But he was trying to protect his mother, and they said, hey, look, this is not such a big deal. If this is her thing, then go ahead and let her do it. Yuck. But I love, let's hold on. Rabbi Zera. I love Rabbi Zera's comment because, a number of people who have parents that they are taking care of, sometimes they get frustrated, overwhelmed, annoyed. And Rabbi Zera is there saying, gee, I wish I had them. I don't have them. I wish I had them. And then he looks at what they're doing and goes, never mind. Which is basically hilarious for the Talmud. I just love that. Okay. So hold on a second. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to get to, I'll just read this part, even though it's not really relevant. Rabbi Abun said, I am free from honoring father and mother. They said his father died when his mother was pregnant and she died in giving birth. So he actually never had either of his parents. So here's a really good discussion in the Talmud. I think probably, do we still have time for it? Okay. Would somebody read where it starts, some person? Zisel, you could do it, right? Some person.
Some person might serve his father fattened meat and inherit hell. Some person might bind his father to the grindstone and inherit paradise. How does one serve his father fattened meat and inherit hell?
Okay, good question, right? I mean, generally would think feed your very, very, very elderly parent great food. That should be enough. And, make them labor, that should be terrible. So keep going.
A person used to serve his father fattened chickens. One day his father said to him, "My son, from where do you get the money for these?" He said to him, old man, eat and shut up, just as dogs eat and are silent." It turns out that he serves his father fattened meat and
And inherits.
fattened meat and the grindstone.
No, wait a second. You skipped a line. Serves his
Fattened
father
meat
fattened
and
meat.
inherit hell.
Okay,
I'm
stop
sorry.
right there.
How
So
does
now,
one?
wait, don't go on yet. So I think this is beautiful. I mean, people can see externals, right? And the external looks good, but if the person who's doing this basically has no respect or compassion for the other person, this isn't a matter of age, this could be anything, but this is with regard to a parent, then it may look good on the outside, but it certainly doesn't look good on the inside. Any comments about this before we go on to the grindstone part?
Rabbi, is the difference between show and substance?
Yes, show and substance. Okay, keep going.
How does one bind his father to the grindstone and inherits paradise? A person was a miller as a grindstone. There came a requisition for millers.
So a requisition for millers is when the government would come, not the Roman government would come and say, we need people for the army. And they went to the millers to get all of the millers to be requisitioned. So he said, "Father, go and grind in my stead. If it should come to pass that anyone be degraded, it is better that it should happen to me rather than to you." So if you've got the millers in the dealing with the grain that has already been ground, those are the people that they go and get. They're not going to get the small fry who are at a grinding stone. So he puts his father where he thinks he will be safe. Go on.
If it should come to pass that anyone be beaten,
yes,
it is better, I have trouble saying, it is better that it should happen to me rather than to you. It turns out that he binds his father to the grindstone and inherits paradise. It is said everybody must fear his mother
remember,
and father.
be in awe.
I'm sorry?
It's not fear, it's be in awe of, but it says fear. Okay, let's not read that part. And we will be, okay, and that's where we'll close with this, even though I have a few additional things. So, any comments, any final comments about this? All right, I think we're done for today. If you hand those back in, next time we're together, we'll do about the way we're supposed to deal with our children, both young and grown, and a few additional things, and that's it. How many more weeks do we have? All of January. Yay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful week. And even if we don't have parents older than we to take care of any longer. These are all lessons for the way to be a mensch, right? Like, how do we deal with ourselves and other people? Thank you. No, I was just wondering when the semester was over. The semester is over at the end of January, not MID as a whole. MID continues. Yeah.
And then it continues on after
Then
that?
there
A new
are-
session?
A new session.
I
There's a
see.
new session.
Hi.
Know about the class that's going to be done for Psalms by Jill. Yeah. It doesn't say anything that it's streamable. Do you know if it will be?
I don't have the slightest idea.
How would I, how I find out? Can I go to the office?
Call Deborah Kudakowski in the rabbinic office, and she'll convey the message to Jill. Because offhand, wait, maybe I have her email address. Hold on.
It's just that I don't know. I don't like going out in the dark.
Okay,
But
hold
I-
on a second, please. I do have it. So, where do I send it?
It's probably easiest if I just write it down. No, it's not a good idea. Hold on. If it's a problem, I can call. It's
No,
not-
just give me your email address.
My email address, okay, vanilla, VANILLA, 1947 at yahoo.com.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You'll be getting Jill Goldbright's email address at $1.
Okay, great, thank you.
What is happening here? Okay, got it. See you. Shabbat?
We took care of his mother for like 17 months. And when I was working, it was Shabbat, because I was head of your congregation, and he had to work. My brother would come and stay with him.
Oh, wow.
So that's the kind of person she was. Nobody would mind staying with her, even though she asked the same question and everything. And, you know, but he just got used to it. And like someone said, and they're looking for her mother, she goes, she would ask for her sister. And she was sometimes called Warren by that name. Why did I call you that? Never called her by, never called her by one of her brothers or her husband, just her sister. And that was just the one sister. It was like, why her sister?
Maybe she sensed Warren's kindness and.
But you would think, she would think of a male. Yeah. I mean, it's her son, so why'd she give him a girl's name?
Wow.
She always wanted to